USAID is supporting and financing the program Transformation of Communications Activity. That's the project I'm working for. The project has been in operation for a year, and one of our activities is the contest of socially significant content, Pitch UA. We've had 3 contests already, so producers of socially significant content for TV, cinema, and online platforms can submit their projects, and then an international jury decides who the winner is. To help our potential applicants prepare a better project, we started an educational platform, Pitch UA, and within this platform we hold master classes involving our international experts. Today's master class will be conducted together with Lviv Media Forum by the expert of our jury, Jennifer Crandall, who came here specifically from the United States. So I am passing the floor to her, and at the end of the presentation you will see a QR code which will lead you to Pitch UA website, where you can find more information about our project and our educational activities. Hope you are interested in that. Thank you, Alexander. So I will now introduce Jennifer, who, as I've already mentioned, is a journalist, director, photographer, and artist. In 2007, Jennifer created On Being project, which was nominated for an Emmy, and you can see it on Jennifer's website. She's currently working on a project called Whitman, Alabama, and this is the project Jennifer will be speaking about today. So we are working for an hour, leaving some time for a Q&A session. So Jennifer, the floor is yours. You're welcome.
Thank you, guys. Thanks to the forum, and thanks to Pitch UA for making this all happen and bringing us together today. And thank you guys for coming and choosing to make today's session a part of your afternoon. And also a shout out to the interpreters. That is not an easy job. I've been listening to you guys this morning, and thank you very much for what you're doing. Okay, so what have I been asked to talk about today? I believe what's written in the program is how to make socially relevant storytelling interesting for the audience that's not already on the side of the storyteller and does not share his or her views. I want to reframe that to say more specifically and importantly that I don't believe we should ever, as storytellers, begin from a place where we are speaking to people who are already invested in our stories or are already bought into what we are trying to say or share. I think when we do that, we tend to become lazy storytellers and the stories suffer. And we need to raise the level of our storytelling so that anyone can engage with the stories we tell and be surprised by it, whether they're on board with what we're telling or not. Real quick, I just want to address this question. Why don't people pay attention to serious stories? Audiences want to be stimulated, whether they already believe the things you're saying or not. They want to think, to act, and to care, and it's our job to get them there. So why is it that oftentimes people seem disinterested or uninterested in what we often think of as serious stories? And why do they ignore serious issues that are affecting the community around them or the community or their own communities and lives? I'll just go over a few points because I definitely do not believe people are disinterested. I believe that essentially, people are first of all busy. You all know we've got busy lives. It's hard to get our attention. We've got a lot going on, family, work. Attention is difficult to capture. Also, we are super saturated with content. There is so much material out there. Anyone can publish anything. It's actually pretty wonderful, but competition for our attention is super fierce. So we have to work super hard and create better content to give ourselves a chance to get eyeballs on what we're doing. Also, people are polarized. You all know this. People oftentimes want to just read or view content that reinforces their own views. So that becomes an issue in terms of getting attention for work that might tell stories that might not align with their thinking. Another one is, I believe there's just too much to care about today. Reading the headlines, whether it's COVID, whether to get vaccinated or not to get vaccinated, what's going on in Afghanistan, climate change, people are constantly told about how to feel and what to care about. And I think that as an audience, we are desperately fatigued, and it's hard to get us to care about one more thing in our lives. And socially relevant stories are just a reminder that there's more to care about. So there's another difficulty in getting people to pay attention to serious stories. And then there's this other point. I believe storytellers, the people in this room, I believe most of you are storytellers of some form. I think we suffer from a peculiar syndrome, or we can suffer from it, and I call it arrogant storyteller syndrome. I think it's one of our biggest problems. As makers of media, I think we take our audience for granted too often, and we believe that as journalists, filmmakers, storytellers of various stripes, we believe that just because we make it, people should pay attention. We sort of treat socially relevant stories as if they're vegetables. It's good for you. I've putting a plate of vegetables in front of you, so eat them. And I just think that that's not a helpful way to approach things. We have to be more thoughtful and strategic about how we approach our storytelling. A funny thing happened before I came here. I was sitting to have dinner with my parents, and my dad has been to Ukraine before, and he said, well, one thing you have to do when you go there, absolutely one thing you have to eat, because he knows I love food, is you have to have borscht. And my mom and I looked at him like, are you crazy? You hate beets. Why are you telling us to eat borscht? And he said, well, borscht is different than beets. Borscht is borscht. And I sort of think that storytelling needs to be like that. Beets, I like beets, but borscht is more interesting. And we need to be thinking that way in terms of our storytelling. Make borscht, don't just hand someone beets. So anyway, we don't want to suffer from that arrogant storyteller syndrome where we think people should just take it because we give it to them. So that's my first tip, and just round up for this section is don't ever take your storytelling for granted. Don't ever take your audience for granted. We've got a huge responsibility, and it's not good enough that we're telling important stories. So today I'll discuss ways that I think about storytelling and how I have found ways to help break through some of the noise and the business and all that content online and get past the empathy fatigue in order to capture audiences that might be aligned with me, but hopefully aren't aligned with the things I'm trying to share. Both are equally important to me. So what I'm going to do today is I'll just give you a little bit more background on who I am, really pretty brief. And I'll share a little bit also about the Whitman, Alabama project so that you have a lot of context there to work with for what I'll be sharing. And then I'm going to show about 20 minutes from the project. We've got about 2 hours and many, many, many episodes, but I'm going to share 20 minutes of the project and 3 episodes from it. So you'll have a sense of my sensibility and where I'm coming from. And then I'll dive into sort of my process for how I made the things that you've just watched on the screen, and how I approach stories with a socially relevant point of view. Hopefully by the end of this session, you'll have 1 or 2 ideas you can take with you for your work going forward, and incorporate into your storytelling. And if we have time at the end, maybe I'll show 1 more video. The nuts and bolts of who I am. I'm an American journalist. I studied photojournalism and comparative religion, and then worked for many years at the Washington Post and various other news organizations doing mostly short-form documentaries for online platforms. And at every place that I worked, I found that I was constantly wondering how we could tell stories differently and how we could also push the boundaries of the definitions of what journalism was and could be. And I would say that in the early days of my career, I was seen as someone who was maybe thinking about this stuff a little bit too much, and how my approach to storytelling was a bit, I don't know, overly thoughtful maybe, and why couldn't I just sort of get to the work? But in the end, I found, and it turned out, that oftentimes the work proved itself. It was, you know, very novel to start, but in the end, it offered other journalists and other storytellers different ways of thinking about how they could make content. So now I'm a freelance journalist, an independent filmmaker, and I consult with individuals and organizations on more creative approaches to more authentic, human-centered approaches to their storytelling. So that led me to being hired to work for the largest news organization in the state of Alabama. It's called Alabama Media Group. And I was hired to do a couple of things there. They didn't have a video team, so I was hired to help give them ideas about starting the video team. And then they also wanted me to create an impactful video project for them, but that was the only direction that they gave me. Just give us a powerful video project, which is a pretty wonderful thing to be given a blank slate, but that's pretty daunting. You know, just do something and make it good. So I had to figure out what that would be. And to give you a little bit more context, I'm sure some of you know a little bit about Alabama, but in case you don't, or for those of you who don't, it's a fascinating state. It's found in the deep south of America. It's known to be politically conservative, socially, religiously conservative state. But unfortunately, it's often stereotyped as a backward state, a racist state, and that's highly reductive. It's too overly simplified, but it's very much burned into the American consciousness that Alabama and the South sort of represents these things. So oftentimes when stories are told in America, probably outside of America too, about the South and about Alabama and Alabamians, the storytelling can be very polarizing and reduced to these simple ideas about that state and that region. And, you know, it's already a deeply polarizing time, I think, in America and elsewhere. There's a very us versus them mentality. Whatever the issue might be, you know, whether you're conservative or liberal, black or white, masks, no masks, the story is always more complex. So to reduce Alabama to, in people's minds, as just being this part of America that is backwards and racist is just too reductive and too simplistic, but there we are. That's how it often is thought of. So I was trying to think, what kind of project could I do? And certainly there were lots of great things that you could tell fun stories about. You know, football and barbecue and food are huge, huge topics in Alabama. But I saw an opportunity to sort of challenge these deeply entrenched views that Americans have about the Deep South, and to try to find a way to remind people that humans are way more complex than we give them credit for, which is strange that we do that because we ourselves know that we are complex. So why do we reduce other people to simple ideas? So I wanted to find a project where I could replace the one-dimensional lens we often use for looking at each other as humans and make it more multi-dimensional. A new way of observing one another and ourselves so that we could maybe know each other better, care to know each other better, and understand each other better.
Jennifer, I'm going to ask you a question while we're doing our technical preparations. So my question would be about the latest, the project that you're presenting, Whitman, Alabama. Why specifically Alabama? Why did you pick specifically Alabama?
A lot of it had to do with luck. I was invited to Alabama first not to do this project, but to go there as a consultant to help start this video team in Alabama. I had never been to the state before, and absolutely fell in love with it the minute I landed, mostly because, like I said before, I love food, and the food there is amazing. And also, I've only been here 2 days, but the food has been amazing here so far as well. And so when they asked me to do a project there, I had A, fallen in love with it, and B, recognized that there's a deep history of a negative view of that part of the country. And I had lived in lots of countries growing up where people, I'm American, but I lived mostly abroad when I was younger, places like Pakistan and Afghanistan, and people would have very negative views of those places. So I'm constantly frustrated by the fact that people tend to reduce a people to the borders that are drawn around them, and can say that people are a certain way because they live in a certain place, and that we forget how complex people are. So it was just a great opportunity to because I had fallen in love with it, and they had asked me to do a project to stay there. I hadn't planned on staying there, to stay there and just really figure it out.
How were you actually approaching and picking up these people, unless it was a producer who was just looking for people for you, but I guess it wasn't just the case.
No, I found definitely I had help, but a lot of people I found, you guys will see these people in the video once we get going, but I spent a lot of time traveling across the state and just meeting people as I went. Certainly people introduced me to people. I don't want to say that I didn't meet people that way, but oftentimes it was just random people that I would stop on the street. Yeah.
Because I've seen in one of the videos that you have, there's a family, just an average family, and there's, I think, a young boy who is reading the verse. So I was just wondering, what were the words that you were asking them to read the poem? What for? How were you explaining the whole project?
Yeah, I'll get into a little bit of that in the talk later, but it was very much, when you're getting people to do something as different as reading poetry for a stranger on camera, I just approached them as I would anyone, introduce myself and explain my process to them, explain what the project was about, and try to make it as comfortable a conversation as possible.
У мене є запитання до Jennifer. Well, I have a question for you.
Okay.
So Jennifer has been on this expert panel for our contest, Pitch UA. And this is a contest where Ukrainian producers of content, they write out proposals and they have to pitch them, defend them, and then they get selected. So what have you learned from these Ukrainian pitches? Like, what is the difference between how Ukrainian storytellers approach these pitches when they present their proposals to maybe what is done in the States with like similar content proposals when they have to seek funding for them, for instance?
I don't know. I don't know if it was different per se. I mean, people pitched with various different levels of clarity. They pitched with various different levels of passion, which is what I find in America too. Mostly what I found was two things. One, the thing that I found that was similar, and the most important thing, was that I found the pitches were oftentimes based on someone else's formula. They were formulaic, so sort of repeating things that they had seen other people do, and they were trying to do that, which is great, but I was always looking for like new approaches in different ways that people were thinking about approaching a story to make it more interesting for audiences. But beyond that, I thought I was really blown away by the technical prowess of people that were pitching and the content that I saw them pitch. So I don't know if there were any like major distinctions between American pitches and Ukrainian audiences, just different levels of clarity in their pitches, and different levels of storytelling ability, which you find everywhere. Yeah.
So when Ukrainian content producers they prepare their proposals and they have to pitch them to an international jury, what do you think they need to pay attention to when they do these pitches? Like, what do they need to sell in their content to be selected?
I think it's, you know, it's something that we're talking about today, which is essentially how do you make your storytelling accessible to a wider audience than just a local audience? How do you make your storytelling more universal rather than so specific to Ukraine if you're trying to pitch it to a foreign panel? Yeah.
Jennifer, thank you very much for coming.
Yeah.
We're very happy to see you here. So I've got a couple of questions. The first one is, what was your incentive to choose poetry in particular as a method of, as a format of asking people to talk? Why not songs? Or why poetry in particular?
Why poetry?
Yeah.
So the question is, why did I choose poetry versus songs? Well, it's harder to get people to sing, first of all. But I hadn't thought of that. The reason I chose poetry was because when I was 16, I had just moved back to America from having lived in Pakistan for 5 years. So I'm American, but I'm half Chinese, I'm half white. I was born in Ethiopia. I was raised in Pakistan. So my sense of identity is really sort of, I don't know, wacky. But the only passport I have is an American passport. And I landed in America at 16, very much trying to figure out, you know, where I fit in the world and how I could express myself. And as you do when you're 16, you sort of, you know, ruminate a lot. And I was in a big bookstore, and I went through the poetry section and pulled a book off the bookshelf of American poetry. And I was flipping through it. And one day I came across Walt Whitman's Song of Myself. And there were, in verse 1, he starts by saying, I celebrate myself and I sing myself, and what I assume you shall assume, because every atom belonging to me is good belongs to you. And I love that because I did feel a part of the world, and being biracial, I felt like I was no one particular thing, and I love this idea that we're all connected. And then there's another verse that I found in the book where he says, do I contradict myself? Very well, I contradict myself. I contain multitudes. And of course, I love that too, because I believe we all contain multitudes. So did Whitman. And so do all of us in this room. And so here was a dead white guy from New York who was helping put words to the things that I was feeling. So, I don't know, 30 years later, when it ended up in Alabama, and I was given this opportunity to tell what I wanted to tell, which is a greater story of America, I thought, what if I took these words of this poet who was already doing an amazing job of talking about America and democracy, multiple selves within ourselves, and the multiplicity of what America could be, and then try to show that with each person that was reading the poetry. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Hi, my name is Alex. I'm a local journalist, so I just would love to know if in America, the media that you have, they are mostly polarized, or it doesn't matter when it comes to the regional journalism. And what we see on the national level, this is like a polarized media, but I wonder how it goes on the regional level.
On the regional level, yeah, I mean, I think there's, thank you. I think it's God, that's a really complex question. I mean, on the one sense, there is very polarized media in America on the national level and on the regional level, absolutely. But I'm very critical of the media, but I'm also very reverential of it. I revere it. I believe that what we do as journalists is very important, but it's very important to be critical of what we do. So there are certainly, I worked for the Washington Post for many years, and while you can criticize the Washington Post or the New York Times for things that I think that they maybe should do differently, I think that there are organizations on the national level and on the local level that are trying to do the good work of not being particularly polarized, even if every once in a while they do things that is polarizing. So, but I do think that this is something we're going to get in today, that even within those organizations that are trying to do good journalism and not be polarized and not be on any one particular political side of things, that they inadvertently polarize their audience via the types of storytelling they tell, the type of storytelling they do. For instance, anytime you get a story about Alabama, it's oftentimes showcasing a religious conservative or a political conservative, or talking about how no one there wants to vaccinate themselves. So if you're constantly using Alabama, for example, as a place to talk about issues and only using Alabama to represent one side of the issue, then even though you're an organization that is trying not to be polarizing, you're inadvertently polarizing your audience by simplifying how you're representing people in your audience. Does that answer your question? It's a really, okay. Okay, thanks for asking.
My question is about organizing a project like that. There are many young journalists here who are dreaming about doing a project, well, not like that, but something on their own. And we know that it's quite hard unless you have, you know, not even Washington Post behind your shoulders, but a media that is supportive, that is giving you resources, a team, you know, an editor and producer, and also money, of course. How do you plan a thing like that in your life?
I didn't. I'm sorry, I can't give people answers to how they can get this kind of work done. I didn't have this job before they gave it to me. I was working independently on my own. The best thing I can tell you guys, the most honest thing I can tell you guys, is the one thing I focused on in my career is always trying to find my particular voice in the work that I do, and always trying to find a way of telling stories differently. And it took me a long time to get there, but eventually I did, and that doesn't mean I get all these jobs. It just means that I have figured out a way to stand out in a way so that when they come along, people might think of me. But ultimately, even when I was working at the Washington Post, I would experiment with things on the weekend. It was mentioned that I had a project called On Being. That project, I would sort of, I'd try to come up with a new form of storytelling, and I would do all my other assignments during the week, but then on the weekend, I filmed that project and created sort of a pilot, and then I could share it with people, and then I got the permission to do it. So I think, I wish I had a magic answer to tell people in terms of how to get these things. A lot of it had to do with luck, but I was prepared because I was prepared with an original approach to something. And so when the opportunity opened, I could do it. But if I'm just waiting for the opportunity and I'm not doing the work to find an original approach or original voice to storytelling in the meantime, then the opportunity could have been open, but I wouldn't have been ready to take it. So I'm sorry I don't have like a magic answer of how you get funding for something or how you get this kind of thing done. But I just managed to work on the pieces on my own in the meantime, and then when the opportunity could strike, I could take advantage of them.
How long are you plan to do this project? It's an ongoing project. You started...
Yeah. So the project was supposed to take a year. It's now been over 5.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
And you plan still to work with it or just finish in the coming, I don't know, months?
It might take the rest of my life. I don't know. But here's the thing I can say. You know, we planned this project to be a year long, but as it became clear that it was working, that it was powerful, the people that hired me gave me more time and space to invest in it. They really allowed it to sort of breathe. And so the project got bigger in our minds as time went on.
Do the people that you are filming watch or have watched the project? What is their reaction?
Yeah.
What are they telling you?
It depends on the person. You know, some people, they feel like it's really affected their lives, and some people are just like, I was happy to do it. It really depends on the person. They've had as many different people there are different reactions to the project, but most seem to have been positively affected by doing it and feel well represented. Yeah. So, how did I do that? In a very, very, very basic sense, what I did was I got people to read poetry on camera. Rather than interviewing people about their lives, I asked strangers that I met in various different ways all across the state to read some American poetry for me and for the camera and for the audience. I'm going to show you 3 videos from Whitman, Alabama. The Whitman in the title comes from Walt Whitman. I'm sure many of you people in the room are familiar with the name, if not the poetry itself. He was writing in the 1800s, and he wrote the poem that I'm using here is called Song of Myself. He published it, the first version, 1855, not too long afterwards. We had, not too long before the start of the Civil War. And there are 52 verses from the poem, and each, I invited one or more people to read each of the stanzas of the poem. So ultimately, when this project gets done, there will be 52 separate videos, each read by a different person or different people in Alabama. Like I said, I'm going to show you 3, because 3 gives you a sense of the scope of the project, a taste of the project. The first one is very short, but I'm showing you this one because it's the first stanza, so I think it's always nice to start with the first stanza. You'll get a little taste of the project. The second one, that's about 3 minutes long. The second one's maybe 5 minutes long, and the third one is about 12 minutes long. I've subtitled them in English, but I really don't think that you have to get too hung up on the poetry or the words that are being said. Just feel free to take it in the way you want to. It's not so important that you're capturing every word that's being recited or shared on the screen. Just watch.
Look right here for me, Virginia May. Just like you are, looking right here at the camera.
Don't move. Stay right there.
And start like this.
And then
Is this before or after the drink of water?
no drinking.
No drinking. No drinking in this home.
I actually put some whiskey in there.
No, shoot. I thought you were going to bring me scotch and soda. I celebrate myself and sing myself. And what I assume, you shall assume. For every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. I loaf and invite my soul. I lean and loaf at my ease, observing a spear of summer grass. My tongue, every atom of my blood formed from this soil, from this air. Born here of parents, born here from parents the same, and their parents the same. I, now 37 years old, and in perfect health, begin, hoping to cease not till death. Creeds and schools and a bath, retiring back a while, sufficed at what they are, but never forgotten. I harbor for good or bad. I permit to speak at every hazard. Nature without check, with original energy.
That was excellent. Yeah. Pretty good at this.
Did we get it?
First day I was here, one of my friends who was a state legislator came to see me, and he said, "Now, John, I want to tell you something that an old politician in Montgomery told me the first day I was in office in the legislature, and don't you ever forget it. You have an important job, a very important job, but you are not an important person. Don't ever forget that."
All right.
Thank you. Please be seated. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Jackson County Circuit Court. Welcome to Drug Court. I'm John Graham. It's my privilege to serve you as one of your circuit judges. Let's see who is here.
I'm Keisha Helton. I pled into drug court January the 17th, 2015. My clean date is 6/6/15.
Anything special going on? Anything out of the ordinary? Anything unusual? Anything I need to know about? Anything you don't want me to know about?
Same old stuff, just meetings, class, raising kids, now getting my kid ready for first grade. It's a handful.
Laggards there on guard, look to your arms. In at the conquered doors they crowd. I am possessed, embody all presences, outlawed or suffering. See myself in prison, shaped like another man, and feel the dull, unintermitted pain. All right, well, thank you, Ms. Helton.
Thank you, sir.
Good luck to you this week. Chris Freeman.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, Mr. Freeman. What's going on?
Doing what I'm supposed to do, Your Honor. Staying clean and sober.
Good.
For me, the keepers of convicts shoulder their carbines and keep watch.
It is I let out in the morning and barred at night. Not a mutineer walks handcuffed to jail, but I am handcuffed to him and walk by his side.
I am less the jolly one there, and more the silent one, with sweat on my twitching lips.
You have a driver's license?
I do.
Is that important?
Yes.
You got reliable transportation?
Most days.
Good, clean place to live?
I do.
Drug-free, crime-free?
Yep.
Good. Let's keep it that way. All right, who's next back there? Y'all being good? Helping mama? What are y'all doing for fun this summer?
Swimming, we go to church, meetings.
Good. Call your sponsor.
Daily. Talk to her for 3 hours some days.
My name is Charles Palmer. My pleading date's February 23rd, 2015, and my clean date is January 27th, 2015.
Doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. Going to meetings, working. Went to visit my sponsor yesterday.
Every now and then, me and my guys from my home group go to Bradford, the treatment center I went to, and it's like a little panel speak.
My name is Joshua Akins. My pleading date is June the 20th. My clean date is March the 20th. Took me a little while to get my head back in it, but I'm back on the right track now.
Not a youngster is taken for larceny, but I go up too, and am tried and sentenced.
Not a cholera patient lies at the last gasp.
But I also lie at the last gasp.
My face is ash-colored, my sinews gnarled.
Away from me, people retreat. Okay, thank y'all. I'm glad to see all of you. We'll be adjourned until next time.
Askers embody themselves in me, and I am embodied in them.
I project my hat, sit shamefaced, and beg.
Can I tell you a little bit more about our project?
I don't care.
So I'm going all around the state with Pierre and some other folks, and we're doing a documentary on Alabamians where I just want to like highlight the lives of different people we meet, because I think Alabama's a pretty fascinating, interesting state. Instead of interviewing people, I'm asking them to read parts of the poem on camera. Would you guys be interested in being on camera at all?
Not really.
Not really?
Not really.
Not your thing?
No.
Not really.
I'm kind. I sit back in the back. I let everybody be up front. I just sit back and listen.
Yeah, that's what I do too, actually.
That's all I do. I don't like to be up front. Nobody knows me.
No. Yeah. Well, you're on it a little bit, but you don't want to be on it anymore, reading some poetry? No? But this is okay right now?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
It's just the poetry that's a bit too much.
Well, let me look at it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why don't you do all this? I'm going in the house.
I do not despise you preached all the time, the world over. My faith is the greatest of faith and the least of faith. Enclosing worship, ancient and modern, and all between ancient and modern. Believing I shall come again upon the earth after 5,000 years. Waiting response from oracle, honoring the gods, saluting the sun.
I stopped because I was hoping y'all were from the Audubon Society, who I haven't called, but somebody will, because there is a white hawk that lives in this 3-mile stretch. God didn't make any white hawks, except for this one.
Well, I'm sorry we're not from the Audubon Society.
Right, it's okay.
We were just
It's
having
all right.
lunch on the side of the road.
It's all right. You probably didn't scare him off. He's probably fine. Don't worry.
In lieu of that, you can read some poetry for us?
Sure.
Okay.
In closing worship, ancient and modern, and all between ancient and modern, believing I shall come again upon the earth after 5,000 years, waiting responses from oracles, honoring the gods, saluting the sun, making a fetish of the first rock or stump, powwowing with sticks in the circle of Ovis, helping the Lama or Brahmin as he trims the lamps of the idols, dancing yet through the streets in a phallic procession, wrapped and austere in the woods of Gymnosophist, drinking mead from the skull cup to Shastas and Vedas admirant, minding the Quran. Kind of makes me want to read Walt Whitman. Thanks.
Well, you know, I'm just kind of used to it, and I'm just like, you know, this is my boss. This is Chase Taylor. Okay.
Chase? Hey, this is Jennifer Crandall. Hey, sorry, you're wondering what we're doing here? Well,
we'll watch out.
My partner and I we're working on a documentary here in Alabama, and we're going around to all different parts of Alabama, and we were like, oh, there's a drive-in theater. This is cool. So we were checking it out, and we're basically trying to highlight the lives of Alabamians all across the state and show how just rich and diverse the state is. Now we just have to convince these women to do it.
Drinking mead from the skull cup to Shastas and Vedas admirant, minding the Quran, walking the Teocallis, spotted with gore from the stone and knife, beating the serpent skin drum. Accepting the Gospels, accepting him that was crucified, knowing assuredly that he is divine. To the Mass kneeling, or the Puritan's prayer rising.
Or sitting patiently in a pew, ranting and frothing in my insane crisis, or waiting dead-like till my spirit arouses me. Looking forth on pavement and land, or outside of pavement and land. Belonging to the winders of the circuit of circuits.
belonging to the wonders of the circuit of circuits. One of that centrifugal and centrifugal game, I turn and talk like a man, leaving charges before he journey. Downhearted doubters, dull and excluded, frivolous, sullen, moping, angry, and affected. Disheartened, atheistical, I know every one of you. I know the sea of torment, doubt, despair, and unbelief.
How the flukes splash.
How the fruits splash.
How they contort rapid as lightning.
How they contort rapid as lightning.
With spasms and spouts of blood.
With spasms and spouts of blood.
Be it peace, bloody flukes.
Be it pieces of blood of fruits.
And you said you have trouble reading. Why is that?
Been so long ago.
Yeah, were you not really taught very well how to read, or?
No.
Be it peace, bloody flukes.
With peace, bloody fruits.
Of doubters and sullen mopers.
I doubted and flooded and opens.
I take my place among you.
I take my place among you.
As much as among any.
As amongst and amongst any.
As much as among any.
As amongst and amongst any.
The past is push of you.
The past is the push of you. Me. All. Precisely the same.
And what is yet untried.
What is yet untried.
And afterward.
And afterward.
Is for you.
Is for you.
Me.
Me.
All precisely the same.
All precisely the same. Yeah, I'm a good reader. I'm not a good reader, but I'm a good singer.
Prove it. Prove it.
Prove it. Okay. I'm late, Selby, John Creed. I'm late, Selby. And let your joy be known, John died for you and me. I'm glad there be John Creed.
Here's pink bubble gum. There's some tiger's blood. Thank you. I do not know what is untried and afterward, but I know it will prove sufficient and cannot fail. Each who passes is considered, each who stops is considered. Not a single one can it fail. It cannot fail the young man who has died and buried, nor the young woman who has died and put by his side, nor the little child that peeked into the door.
And then drew back and was never seen again. Nor the old man who has lived without purpose and fills it with bitterness, worse than gold. him in the poorhouse tubercled by rum and the bad disorder, nor the numberless slaughtered and wrecked, nor the brutish kabooed call the order of humanity. Nor the sacks merely floating with open mouths for food to slip in, nor anything in the earth or down in the oldest graves of the earth, nor anything in the myriads of spears, nor the myriads of myriads that inhabit them, nor the present, nor the least wisp that is known.
Oh, are you okay?
We're done. You could see that we filmed people all over the place, and there's a lot more of these videos. We're filming people in the air, underground, in caves, in prisons, on the street, in schools. There's no set length for any of these videos. We just sort of like let them become what they are, which is probably why the project is taking longer than we expected. And the response to the project in Alabama and in the United States has been pretty positive. People are very much have expressed they appreciate this different format, and countless people have said how it has affected their outlook on their fellow Americans. So I'm going to go ahead and sort of try to quickly unpack and deconstruct for you the thinking that went into making Whitman, Alabama, and what I believe is a useful and effective approach to storytelling, as it worked for me. So with every story or project I undertake, I boil down my ideas to two questions that I ask myself over and over from start to finish throughout my work. The two questions are my compass and North Star. There's a lot packed into these questions, and how you answer these questions will be different than how I answered them, but I believe that you should be asking yourself these questions when you're doing this work. So the two questions are, what am I doing to make the people in my stories feel like flesh, bone, and soul to the audience? And what am I doing to earn my audience? So what am I doing to make the people in my stories feel like flesh, bone, and soul to the audience? And why even ask this question? Your subjects, characters, and the people in your stories, they're the core of your stories, or the engine of your stories, and everything pivots around your subjects, your characters, your heroes, as the word is I hear translated a lot into English here. So I ask myself, what am I going to do in the audience to make them, for the audience, to make them feel like flesh, bone, and soul that they are to the audience? How do I make them as present as possible in my stories? Doing this will take you a long way. I think you all can relate to whenever you're watching content or films or shows that really move you, oftentimes you just really feel connected to the people that you're seeing on screen. And I find it's important in nonfiction storytelling is how real the characters can feel to me. So your subjects, again, are the heart and soul of your stories. And what do you stand to lose if you don't focus and put a lot of your energy on your subjects? Don't you want to obtain the best material you work with when you're constructing your stories? You know, whether you're writing the story or filming the story, all the potential that you can get out of your subjects, you want to be able to get because they drive that engine. So what do you stand to lose if you don't pay attention on your subjects, heavy attention on your subjects? You stand to lose the strength of the emotional engine of your story. The second question, what am I doing to earn an audience? Simply, I believe you need to work from a place of thinking you don't have an audience yet. It's not your audience. No one is just given an audience yet. Hopefully you'll have one. You have a potential audience. So you need to approach all your work, or I approach all my work from thinking I don't have a single audience member yet. We're not owed our, we're just not owed our audience. So don't presume it's there. And what do you stand to lose unless you have this approach? At least this is what I believe. You stand to lose the impact that you're looking for with your storytelling. Okay, so here's a breakdown of my process so that I can give you a sense of how I answered a couple of those two questions. Working with your subjects. What can I do to make the people in my stories feel real? To me, this is obvious. Start with respect. They're human. How would you want to be treated? I think oftentimes as storytellers, we forget that the people that we are speaking to are people too, and we need to put ourselves in their shoes and understand what it would be like to be on their end of things. And a lot of this is just about getting back to the basics of human connectivity and decency. Your subjects are not here simply to serve your story. They've got lives beyond what they're doing for you, for your story. And for example, one thing you can do with your subjects, and you saw a little bit of it in the video that I showed with me and the couple on the front porch, is explain your process to your subjects so they feel safe with what you're doing, empowered, knowledgeable about what the process is, so they can feel like they're a participant in the storytelling that's happening, versus you coming in and just sort of taking what you need from your subjects and then moving on. Another thing I think a lot about is putting humanity before beauty. There is so much content being produced right now, and I think it's really great that there's a lot more people making documentaries, making stories, and more people have those tools in their hands, and that's wonderful. But I've noticed that there's a trend, there's just a lot of beautiful content out there, and by beautiful I mean it looks good, it's technically brilliant, but there's not a lot of heart to it. The storytelling isn't very strong. I can tell that the filmmakers are putting a priority on the beauty of their work, the aesthetics of their work, versus the beauty that they can sort of pull from their subjects and pull out of their subjects. Oftentimes with this project, with Whitman, Alabama, there's technical errors that show up in the pieces, but we'll keep them in the final edit because something wonderful is happening on the screen. And I'm never, when I'm in the field and working with subjects, more concerned about the lighting and the camera position than how I'm treating the people that are giving me their time. I'm sure you've heard this a lot today in the other storytelling chats, but your headspace when dealing with subjects should always be curious and genuine. And I think this is easy to say, but sometimes hard to do, but one of the most important things. If you can convey all your curiosity into your storytelling, the viewer will feel that curiosity. And you need to check with yourself to see if you're truly being curious with and interested and genuine with your subjects, or you're just sort of trying to use them to get information and again, move on to the next thing. With the gentleman in the last video that you saw who couldn't read, it really turned into one of the best moments we have in this documentary, because when I found out he couldn't read, it was really a realization for me that not everyone obviously comes from the point of privilege and is literate like I am. And instead of moving on and trying to find the next person who could read, we found a way for him to participate in the project, and he I was still curious about who he was and how he'd be willing to play a role in the project. And what he ended up offering is one of the most beautiful scenes that we could not have expected, where he ends up singing for the camera. So always, you know, have a headspace that keeps you curious and genuine and interested in your subjects. Another one is to be vulnerable with your subjects. If you want people to be vulnerable, open, and real for you, you need to create an atmosphere where you also are willing to be vulnerable, and then that creates an atmosphere of intimacy, that if you can capture that that atmosphere of intimacy, your audience will feel that. And what shows up on camera isn't necessarily a beautiful shot with beautiful lighting, but real texture and feel of a real intimate moment with your subjects. Reading poetry on camera is an incredibly vulnerable thing to do. For these people to say yes, it's risky. They're really opening themselves up in a way that, when I think about it, if a stranger walked up to me, I might be scared to do something like that. So they're being vulnerable for me. I need to learn to be vulnerable for them. And an example of that, I haven't shown this video, but there was another video where we met a gentleman, and he did a wonderful read for us, showed us all around his house. It's verse 50, it's in the project. And he's someone who claims he can decipher your personality based on reading your handwriting. And so he had just done this, you know, great read for us, and so he offered to decipher my handwriting and tell me about me. And I said yes. And he looked at me, told me a bunch of things about myself, and at one point said, "I think you're a little bit gay." And I decided to be open with him, and I said, "I think you're right." And so and then at the end of his read, he ended up revealing that he might be a little bit gay too. And so I think my vulnerability with him opened him up, and vice versa. And it was a really wonderful piece that opened up as a result of us feeling quite vulnerable with each other. Another point is to not be blind to what's under your nose when you're dealing with your subjects and looking for subjects, meaning your characters. Be open to a change of plans, and don't always force the story that you're setting out to tell. The woman at the very end of the last piece you saw that was cleaning the hotel, my colleague Pierre Qatar and I woke up that day trying to figure out where we were going to go, who was going to be the next person we were going to meet. It was going to be a long day. It was hot Alabama summer, and we just had we had various different ideas we were thinking of, and then we realized once we left our hotel room, there's going to be someone coming in right behind us. We didn't need to go anywhere. Someone was going to be coming in right after us to clean up the mess that we left in our hotel room. So Diana, who finished that last episode, the heat, exhaustion just sort of got to her, and you saw her sort of fall over at the end. She was the woman who was cleaning the hotel that we were staying in. So we had other plans for the day to be in a different part of the state, but we kept our mind open to the possibilities around us. So always keep your eyes and ears open to what's right in front of you. Remember that we all contain multitudes. This is the line from Song of Myself that I love so much. Your subjects, the people, period, are multidimensional, and you always need to think of them that way. And, you know, it's important to represent people in a way that they feel multidimensional to the audience, because the audience, they'll just feel more a presence that way. For example, the video that we saw in the drug court, that could have just been a story that shared statistics and stories and sad stories about people that were dealing with drug addiction. But instead, you see them reading poetry, you see that they've got children, and so it's, you just get a different sense of who people are that are struggling with drug addiction versus just sort of looking at them as if they're all just simply addicts. And finally, remember the gift. When someone says yes to being a part of your story, they're giving you a gift, and you should treat it as such. So the second question, earning an audience. Much like the respecting your subjects, your characters, you need to ask yourself, what am I doing to earn the audience? And never take for granted that just because you make it, people are going to watch it. Remember that respecting your audience means that they are intuitive, they are smart, they expect more from you. They know in their guts when you're just giving them information. When people in they might not articulate it, but when they're watching stories and people are just sort of put in there to represent an idea that they don't feel like flesh and bone, they react to this. They don't react as strongly to it. Your audience is smart and curious and wants their thoughts to be provoked. So don't simply tell them things. They want to be activated and have nuanced and engaging stories, and they want to be a participant in those stories. So second thing to earning an audience is, play with form and structure. Offer your audience a new experience that can be exciting for them. You can find inspiration for how to do that in unlikely places. My answer to that was in the shape of a poem. And so there's no set length to this project, no set length to these videos. And we played with the form in that we reinterpreted the interview format. Instead of interviewing people, we just had them read this really wonderful poetic text. So be asking yourself questions about how you can play with shape and form in your storytelling, whether it be a single story or a larger project. And also there was a cumulative effect with this project. Each of these pieces can stand on their own, but they add up to greater meaning once you see them played all against each other. Once all the episodes you see more of the episodes. Build multiple lanes for entry for your audience to find something to connect to. So in this project, you could maybe simply be interested in it because of the poetry, or you could be interested in it because you love someone in Alabama or are from Alabama, or because each individual piece has its own specific narrative arc. So there's a lot of layers to this project, and by creating layers, it allows the audience to find their way into the story in a different way. If you can build multiple lanes of entry to your project, you give yourself more of a chance for your audience to find something that they enjoy. Stop telling stories. This is a little bit funny because we always talk about storytelling and refer to ourselves as storytellers, but what I mean by that is so much of the storytelling that we do is prescriptive. It tells you what the story is. Here's the story, here's what you need to know about these people, and it doesn't actually spark your audience to question things. We need to have our audience walking away with questions, not thinking they know the answers to everything, so that we can activate them. So I think of this as sort of sideways storytelling. The drug court video is an example of that. Again, I could be telling a story that is all about the stats and statistics of drug issues, the opioid epidemic in America. But instead, I wanted to come at that issue sideways so that maybe when you read a story like that in the future, you might bring a different sense of who the people are that are affected by it to those other stories that are more direct and affect your understanding of the issues even to a greater degree. Just a couple more. Be 1 or 2 steps ahead of your audience at all times. Again, if you think of them as smart, which you should, you need to keep them on their toes in order to keep them interested. So I spend a lot of time trying to think about how to surprise my audience and subvert their expectations and give them something that they might not expect. We saw that with a different structure. We saw that with a different take on the interview by having them read poetry. But I would also choose characters that might not be who you would expect. And I would always, in my editing process, make sure that there was elements of surprise in some way that would subvert what you would expect you or think you were getting. Make the specific universal. This project was offered to, I was asked to do this project in Alabama, but I wanted this to not just be a project that would speak to an Alabama audience, because it is about, you know, who we are as Americans. I want it to be an American project. It speaks to more people if you can find a way to make your work feel more universal and not so specific, though the specific is just as important. And that also gives the audience another way of finding themselves into the material. Last 2 points. Leave a sense of mystery. You know, I show you a lot about these people, and again, this goes back to prescriptive storytelling and storytelling where we tell you everything that we think you need to know about the person. I give you a lot of information. We give you a lot of information in these videos, but we don't tell you everything, and so hopefully we leave you with a sense of wanting to know more. And finally, take the parent test. The parent test is just something I came up with for myself in the early days when I was working at the Washington Post. I would always ask myself, is the work that I'm making or the stories that I'm telling, am I doing it in a way that my parents would watch this if they weren't my parents, if my friends would watch this if they weren't my friends, or would I watch this? Would I click on this content if I weren't the one to make it? And oftentimes, I think the answer could be no to that. And so I would try to find a different way of telling the story so that whether I made it or not, someone that I would click on it, or my parents might click to watch the material. So think about what you're doing to earn your audience, and give yourself that parent test. So I'll just close real quick. This, like I said, this framework is not the only route to making socially relevant stories in a compelling way. It's just the way I approach it, and I feel like there's a lot of those 2 questions that I asked are an important way of framing your thinking, and it's how you answer those questions that'll help you you know, come up with original approaches to storytelling. We all work hard and we want our stories to make a difference. That's what we're here to do. We want them to have impact. So, you know, remember to try when you're working with your subjects, especially with socially relevant stories, to capture as much of that flesh, bone, and soul as you can from your subjects, to treat them with respect, and also your audience with respect, and figure out, constantly ask yourself, what solutions am I coming up with to earn the audience and their continued attention? And if you can find a way of tackling those questions, I think you'll discover some really interesting answers and do some really powerful storytelling.
Where do you find heroes of your stories, and do you have any previous research before your trip, and maybe you have previous appointment with people for conversation?
Yeah, thank you. I found people in all sorts of different ways. You know, when I first moved to Alabama, I didn't know many people there, and I would let people know that I was doing this project and said, feel free to introduce anyone you want to me. And I met a few people that way. In fact, the first woman I met, because I went to church, and with 2 of her friends invited me to church, and she happened to be in a play. So I saw her at a play there and said she has to be in this if she would do it. And another way that I'll do it is I'll have a specific idea. Like I thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool to be in a courtroom? So I specifically looked for a courtroom to film a scene somewhere in a courtroom. But the way I like to do it mostly is to find them myself, to go out on the road. The last verse that you saw very much represents that, where one day we were just sort of like, where should we go? And we realized that we were on Route 43. So we looked in the poem and saw that verse 43 was a nice long one. And so we just said, everyone that we meet from now forward, before we go home, we'll ask them to read some poetry. So I just meet them in any way you can. You know, people introduce you to people, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. I get ideas, so I go and follow up, and I go chase them down, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And the other is just getting out there and running into a guy who's changing his tire on the side of the road. And I couldn't believe that he said yes to us. He was late for work and his tire, you know, his tire had gone flat, and he said, absolutely, let's go. You know, really wonderful. So any which way you can meet someone, I'm open to it. Yeah.
Just not the serious one. What was this moment in the video? You were doing this and the girl was doing it?
Oh yeah, there was mosquitoes.
Okay.
Mosquitoes, yeah. Yeah, thanks for asking.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for this documentary. This is brilliant, really, and I felt like I've been there.
Great.
Just the spirit is incredible. Very American, but still, I could feel it. Well, the question is, first, I asked you about the polarized media on the national level and the regional level, and what I see here, maybe this is the key for finding the unity and for, you know, sharing the emotions with other people. And this kind of content reveals the true selves of people and actually shows that we are the same. Rather, we are like from different, rather we are different on political point of view, but yes, as human beings, we are the same. And I would love to ask you, did you check how these how your project was met in other states or in other communities outside of Alabama, and what they felt about that when they saw this?
Yeah, thank you. First, I'll add one thing to your question. What was really important to me was that first, I didn't piss off a bunch of Alabamians when I made this, because they have been treated very one-dimensionally in the press, and so that was equally as important for me, if not more important, was to make sure that the audience within the state, you know, not everyone is going to love this. I'm not going to say that's the case, but it was overwhelmingly positive from the people that told me. And then we received, I can't tell you, countless emails from people from northern states, western states, from Ireland, from China, from all over the world, actually, but definitely Americans who said that they are looking, that they were ashamed to admit that they had looked at people in the South a little one-dimensionally, and that the project helped open them up to seeing people differently. I don't think I'm trying to, I mean, I guess you could say I have an agenda with this, but I'm not trying to tell you how to think about people, but I am just trying to show you people in a multi-dimensional way, and I feel like if I can remind people to look at people that way, then they do the work themselves of figuring out that maybe they haven't been very open-minded about others. So yeah, the reaction in different parts of the country has been very positive to the project. Yeah.
I think it's inevitable you start, if not loving them, but feeling real sympathy to them, just people's, you know, stopping doing some things and starting reading poetry. It's just something that inevitably, absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. Окей, у кого ще є запитання?
Good afternoon. So could you please tell me what impressed you the most during your trip, and did you include your impression in the video?
I think it's just the generosity of people, and I don't think that that is only an Alabama thing. I think people are very generous if you create that space for them to be generous. But to be honest, I probably would say no if someone came and asked me to do this project, but people constantly said yes. And so I think that just how the depth of human generosity is constantly what blows me away. And did I show that in the video? I think I showed that by making this project and showing off their generosity. So my answer was the project itself. I hope that answers your question.
How often have you had cases when it was hard to talk to a person, and what were your solutions to get more information out of the person? So there might be different situations. And question number two, how do you talk about sensitive, traumatic topics to a person so as not to hurt them more by asking questions? Thank you.
Well, first of all, like I said, as one of the points that I wanted to share was at the end of the day, if you say no to me, you say no to me. Like, I don't need to do everything I can to get you to say yes, because upsetting you is not as important, I don't want to upset my subjects, and I don't need something more than, it's not more important for me to have them in the documentary than just treating them with respect and with the humanity they deserve. So for example, the guy on the front porch, it's very much how you approach people. I'm there to approach them first, again, as humans, not like I need to get them in my story. And so I said to him when we walked up to him on the porch, like, hey, we're filming today. It's all about Alabama. Do you mind if we start rolling as I ask you some questions? I approach everyone differently. In that particular situation, that's what we did. And he said, no problem. And then, you know, I spoke to him a lot about the project. And then what you do see on camera is me asking him to be in the project. And he said no. And that's fine for me. It's fine if people say no. But I was curious about why he said no. And so I asked him a little bit more, and then he just sort of turned around and said, well, I'll do it for you. So for me, it's, again, creating a space, an environment where people don't feel like I'm only there to extract something from them. I'm curious about them. I'm interested as a human about who they are. And I'm going to tell you that I think 98% of the people, I'm just a number, like maybe 1 or 2 people said no. I mean, I'm not done with the project, but it was overwhelmingly yes. And again, I think that has to do with me treating them a certain way. The second question.
How do you talk to people about something traumatizing without feeling them, making them feel even worse?
I'm not an expert at that. I don't know what's going to be traumatizing for people. But I do try to, I spend a lot of time, as journalists we go out there and I think we push our agenda a lot, and I don't mean political agenda, I just mean our agenda of needing to get the story, and I don't do that. I'm trying to receive a lot, I'm trying to understand a lot from that person. So I'll use Anthony as an example. He was the gentleman who can't read, and I don't know if I handled that situation well, but what I did was to try to keep him involved in the project versus saying he can't read, so how am I gonna have him in this project if he can't read poetry? And then when he talked, it turned out, in my brain I'm thinking he can't read, there's a reason for it. And so I was just thinking, you know, instead of saying you never learned how to read, I also assumed that maybe he was never taught how to read. So I don't really know how to answer that, but it goes back to, you know, just being human, realizing people are multidimensional, and also, you know, picking up various different cues that they're giving you about who they are and trying to respond as appropriately as possible. And that's, again, just turning on as many of your antenna for being human as possible. I'm sorry if that didn't quite answer your question. Yeah.
I think that's it. We need to wrap up. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you for your work.
Guys, so this is the end of our today's masterclass, and this is the end of our flow. Today we spoke about creating stories, about heroes, about the genres in which you can create and tell really profound stories. Thank you for participation. That is all for today. I'm Angelina Karyakina. Go to Lviv Media Forum website and you will see many pictures on social media, and see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.